Hi, I'm Lars. Welcome back to the C# workshop. This video is going to pick up where the last video on web services stopped. It's going to cover JavaScript web tokens, or what a lot of people call JWTs, and how cool .NET has all this built into it and how it does it better than any other language. I hope this video is a great reference for JWTs, so like and subscribe to this channel because you never know when you're going to need this information. So let's get to it. So what we're working on here, we're working on a JavaScript web token. That's it. It's very simple to do in .NET, at least. It's very simple to do. We're going to pick up where we left off with the web services. Now, we have our channel, we have our web API customer, and everything's pretty much the same as it was. If you have not seen that video, I highly recommend watching that video before you watch this, unless you already know how to set up web services and you're doing everything the same way that we normally do it. Inside of the channel, you have your HTTP config, which we were using the local customer here, and that's it. We need to add a JWT bearer config inside of the app settings. We're also going to pick this up out of here, and we're going to make a copy of it over here in the customer. And what we're going to do is we're going to get rid of the client because I don't want anyone to get confused on what we're doing here. This is all we're doing is the JWT. What you need to do is you need to right click on this, go to properties, or click on properties below and make sure this says copy if newer. The second thing that we're going to need is we're going to need authentication. Now, the reason I'm saying you don't put this in customer because you might have a products web API, you might have an equipment web API, you might have all kinds of them, one for billing and whatever. You don't want to tie all this stuff up and say every single one of these need to have their own authentication. You want to centralize that in case you do go to a third party for your JWT. And there's plenty of them out there. I'm not going to get into who they are. Now, same thing over here. We have the same app settings JSON. We have the same JWT token. They all have to match. All right. All your authorities and audiences have to match because these guys have to decrypt. Now, the second thing that I'm going to talk about here is this WebApi.Security. We have a controller in it. It's called Authentication Controller. Now, we haven't talked about all this. One thing that is here is the word authorize. This allows us to tell .NET that, hey, we've got authorization coming in here. So if someone is not authorized to come in, we don't want you coming in. The second thing is where we're generating the token, we're saying we're going to allow anonymous coming into here. And that's pretty much it. There's a couple other things that we got going on here. We're just checking to make sure the customer is not equal to 0, and then we're going to call back to the API security, much like what we did up here in customer. And in here, we're just going to generate, I'm going to expand this so you guys can see it. We're going to generate a JWT token. Now, the security key, the issuer, the audience, okay, these guys are very important for us to hold on to. Now, the issuer here, notice there's nothing here pulling this out of our JSON, and we could do that if you wanted to, but I'm electing right now not to go down that path. Security key the secret key gets encoded, the credentials get encoded. We're going to set up a claim set. We're just going to put the customer ID, the first name and the last name and the email address on here. Nothing major. Again, this is not authorization. This is authentication. This sets that claim that I was talking about. So here's the claim, and then we create the token. And this all gets created into a token. The JWT security token is something that is produced by .NET. We get a token handler. We set all our credentials. Here's the authentication. This is our common authentication. So we set the credentials to say email address equal to email address, and then the JSON web token is assigned the JWT security token. And that's it. And then we serialize this and send it back. Once it gets sent back, it comes back to here. We return this back out, and then it ends up back in whoever's hands that called it. So that's all that there is about how this actually works. The key is getting this thing set up. So the first thing we need to do to get it set up is both of these projects the customer, which I'm going to set these side by side right now, and the authentication, the security, have got to read from this app settings. So we're going to have to add in here the handy dandy configuration. So here's a configuration. This actually has a JWT bearer config. And it's very simple. There's no list of anything here, so I don't have a settings. It's just read this out of the JT bearer config. It has an authority and an audience in it. That's it. It's exactly what's sitting in here. And as I'm loading this, I will tell you, I do put all of my configurations inside of this project, and then I can pick this project up and move it wherever I want. It doesn't mean that you need to put everything in your app settings. It's just that it is there available so that you don't have to create it every single time. Now, we need to go over here to program. So this guy has got the configuration going on. So we're trying to read from the configuration, right? App settings. This is much like what is going on over here with channel. So this should not be new if you've already seen the other video. This is the configuration. We did the build, create builder. We added a controller. We added all the versioning and stuff. Now we need to add the JWT. So I'm going to start over here on the security, and we'll go from there. Much like the channel, we need to have a builder come over. I'm just going to bring this down to keep everything together. It's what I'm working on. And inside of this, we need to add 2 singletons. And if you remember over here, we did add a singleton for the HTTP client in the channel. So there's your HTTP client, and then we're going to add one in for the JWT bearer config. So both of these are going to get added in here, just like that. And you can extend them on, or you could, if you don't feel comfortable doing that, you can do this, like that, put a semicolon at the end. Now this is the same thing we're going to do over here, but we've already got a create builder. And the only thing we don't know is we don't need this, so we have to add this project configuration to the customer. And then when you mouse over this, you come here, you say, give me configuration, and everything will come in. This is where the weird part comes in, because we didn't have to do this over here on the channel. I'm going to push these down a little bit. We need to build something called an iService provider, because we need to instantiate this iJBearer config. So that's what this comes in. So this is just saying builder services, build a service provider. You're going to get a little squiggly bracket saying that this is going to create extra copies of the singleton, but there's really nothing you can do about it at this point in time. I will show you at the end of the video how to get past this. This instantiates, gets a required service that's already out there called iJWT bearer config. All right, so it's going to pick up this interface. Now at this point, and I'm just going to keep on copying these back and forth because they're going to be identical. At this point is where we start setting up everything for the authentication. If that iJWT bearer config is not null, otherwise it was in the app settings JSON, we found it, we created it, the service provider, we created a bearer config, and it is not null. Everything is there. Notice the secret key. If we go back over to authentication here, this is going to be the same secret key, the same issuer and the same audience. Okay, so same issuer and audience. There's your issuer, your authority and audience. I know the words have changed. I don't know why they have. The first thing we do is the add authentication. We're just going to use the JWT bearer defaults authentication schema. So there's all those go in. Then we're going to add the JWT bearer. And that is based on the schema. The options are save a tokens true. We don't require metadata. And here's the validation token parameters. The reason we needed to instantiate this is because we needed to put them inside of this token. All right. The secret key, this needs to be at least 32 characters long. The secret key gets encoded also and gets put in the issuer signing key. Now, the name class type ID, I will come back and touch on this probably about 3 or 4 minutes from now. But this is very important. This name here, this name claim type, confuses a lot of people. Once you understand it, then it will make more sense. So that's the same thing we're putting over here on this side. Now, let's find out if what we did is right. We're going to start each of these guys up, going to put a breakpoint on the IJWT bearer config. Okay, so on the customer, we stepped over that, and the bearer config has what we want in it. So that looks really good. All right, so far we're doing good. The rest of this stuff here is good. Everything else should run exactly the way it was, so we're going to stop that one. Then we're going to start up security and step over it, and we've got this here too. Hey, if you think there's too much information to remember, then like and subscribe to the channel. Then you'll have a URL that you can go back and look at anytime. We're going to go to customer controller, and I'm going to bring, actually I'm going to set these two side by side like this, and then we're going to pop this guy here. So I'm going to set security and customer side by side, and we're going to go to authentication controller. Now remember what I said is we needed the authorize over here. All right. For right now, if we were to just hit run HTTP on customer, I'm just going to drop, there's your customer, it's running. Just going to minimize that. We're going to go over here to channel. I'm going to put a breakpoint here. So now that we're here, let me hit F10. Just going to step over everything and see what we get back. And look at that, we got a bunch of information back. Let's take a look at what we got. Everything's cool. Now, we haven't added any authentication, so why is this working? Let me show you. We're going to stop channel now, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to put over here authorize. Now what this is saying, I need to be authorized to use this. All right, and what that means is I need to send in a token that matches all this stuff up, because when that authorize is sitting there, and only when that authorize is sitting there, before I run this, it's going to say, can you even get into the system? So this is still running. We're going to restart it. And there's a breakpoint. Remember, every time that we've ran this, I've put a breakpoint on the constructor. Now, watch what happens when we run it now. We don't hit here. We're dropped. But look at that. Status code says unauthorized. Ran to completion. Now I can't get in. So now we're looking at something that is promising. If we add in here, we're going to put a string in, and we're going to call this result authentication is equal to await retrieve authentication. Now I've already got a retrieve authentication down here, so let's just go and take a look at it. It's exactly like retrieve by customer by ID. You bring in a customer, but this is going to have the email and password. It's going to serialize that payload, and then we're going to set up the HTTP client setting. This service is security, the controller is authentication, because in app settings JSON, that's what we have, security and controller. Service is security, controller is authentication. So that will be the keys we go to it. Now we're just going to call post async with this information, just like we did up here, but we're also going to be changing that over to generate JWT token. So we're going to go to a different location, okay? Now, when we come back, I'm going to put in here, if not string is null or white space for the result authentication, then we need to deserialize this. And we're going to deserialize this into an authentication object. Okay, so we're going to deserialize this using the serialization. Deserialization. And we're going to put in our authentication. And you're going to put in the result authentication, like that. At this point, now we can call this again. But we're going to call this result 2. And now we can throw authentication into it. So if we start up customer,
you're going to get this guy. And I'm going to copy this off of here like this because I haven't set this up for security yet. We go over to security, which is sitting down here. We are going to go here to properties. I'm going to go to debug, debug. And where this says Swagger, we're going to put in an OpenAPI v1 JSON. That's it. And then we're going to start you up. There you go. So this says WebApi.Security. Now, the first thing that we're going to do is we're going to call customer without an authentication. So I'm just going to hit F10 because we've already been down this path. And it says status code unauthorized, just like we did before. Now you're going to get retrieve authentication here. And I'm just going to hit F10 because it's doing the same thing except for it's calling over to security. See? Now we're into the generate JWT. And we're going to go validate the email that we put in and the password and those match. So if you want to look at it, it says this. Password. And then we're just going to fill up the rest of the fields. That's it. Customer ID is not equal to 0. So we're going to come into authentication. We're going to call generate JWT token. Set claims JWT security token. Then we're creating the authentication class. Okay, we're going to create an object out of this class. The credentials are going to come in. We're going to put our email address in. I don't want my password put in there. No reason to have it floating around everywhere. And then the JWT security token is going to be sent. We're going to serialize this back to JSON. And we come up to here. Now we have a big JSON. What I'm going to do is I'm going to put a breakpoint right here because I don't know if I have one down at the bottom here. I do not. So I'm going to put a breakpoint there so that when I hit F5, we come back to this point. At this point in time, we're done with security. Now, you don't need to close it down or anything, but just leave it there. But if you look at result authentication and you go under text visualizer and you say JWT decode, well, you're not going to get anything. So let's just keep on moving down the way. Now we deserialize this into authentication. And now when we take a look at the JsonWebToken, now that it's been separated in a string, now you can see it broken apart. And this is our payload that we put there on the other side. Here's our signature, which is actually, this needs to be 32 characters long. Now when you call retrieve by customer ID, you're going to have a little bit different interaction. And this is the customer over here. I'm going to minimize this back over to this. So when we run it, you can see that the customer controller is going to get hit this time. Look at that, hit the breakpoint. Hit the controller. I'm just going to hit F5 because all that's going to do is set everything up. Let me expand this out. Actually, let me do this. I'm going to put a breakpoint here. Don't need these two anymore. Expand this out. And we're going to create the customer API. Remember the API customer, we got to create this, get this object into memory. Sequence is from before, going to F11 into this. So first name will get set, last name, user, remember no password. And then we come back out. And I'm just going to hit F5 to dump completely out. Come back to channel. And now you get your JWT is all worked out here. So if we open this up and look at it in JSON, you'll see everything is here that you need. Customer ID, email address, first name, last name. Here's your sequence. Anything else you could put in here that you wanted. Okay, now that kind of seemed a little easy, right? I mean, we did have authorize on here. That means that we did have JWT, but how do we actually know? So remember back over here on program and I was talking about this claim type customer ID? There is another check that you can put in here, and I very highly recommend this. Now, this is all built into the .NET framework, and this is your identity. All right, so if you're not using this, there's kind of a problem. What we want to put in here is this. Now, I'm just going to put a little wrap around this and just return null, because I don't want anyone to know that we were here. right? I don't want them to know that they even got here. So this is going to check to see if the user identity name is greater than 0. Now, I probably should make this not equal to 0 since the other one's not equal to 0, but that's okay. So let's just put this breakpoint here, and I'm going to restart the customer, and then I'm going to bring this up to here, and the authentication should still be there. It is. And we're going to hit F10. Now we're at the constructor over here. We're going to hit F5, F10 in. Now if you look at the name, it says identity name view is equal to 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So when we were looking at this name over here, this name claim type, the customer ID is part of the JWT. So where the JWT got set over here, it has in it a claim. So this is your name claim type. I don't know why they named it like that, but this is your claim name type. I don't know why it's name claim type. So inside of any of the claims, or the first claim, I should say, it's looking for either customer ID, name, or email. We have set this to customer ID. So when the data came in through HTTP, .NET ripped a bunch of stuff out of the header and said, boom, here's customer ID. We're going to set that to our user identity name. So with that in mind, we are 100% legit to come in, and now we can just go and retrieve the ID. Now, I said I would show you an easier way to set this up, and I highly recommend this. If you are not doing this yet, you need to start. Inside a channel, instead of having to remember how to put all this stuff in here, you can literally put this in to your own configuration. I'm just going to comment this out of here like that. And then the builder, we definitely need to keep you in there. So let me pull that out and drop this like this. Or you can drop it down here. It doesn't really matter. So what you have is you have a configuration that's coming from channel. Now this channel is mine. There's nothing in it, but it does go up to the base builder. And the reason it is because I wanted this for the web and the channel portion of it not to be separated. This just has the read applications settings in it. It's nothing really major. It just puts it all together. It allows you to change things for all of your services at one time. That's the point of centralizing this. If this was not centralized, then I needed to go in and say, oh, well, we're going to do this now, or whatever, X, Y, or Z. It doesn't really matter. I would have to go change it in every single application. This way, all I need to do is update configuration and throw that DLL out everywhere, and everybody will be happy. So with that in mind, I could just get rid of all this. The builder add host worker, that's something that I could add to this. Not a big deal. We just put, worker here. It's just very difficult to be able to get an instance in this type name, so it's easier just to leave it out. The channel add services. This guy is, again, part of the base builder. So here's the add services. So we have to bring in the services, and that is part of builder services. The configuration, and then authentication. So if I wanted to add authentication, I could send in true, but the default is false, and we don't need it. Now, likewise, over here in customer is you have all this stuff in program, right? Controllers, versioning, there's a whole bunch of stuff here. But if we were to use Web API, you've got add controller information, and the base builder has the same stuff that we just used over in the channel. So if we go to the program channel and say, give me this, I can go back over to here. I'm just going to put this up at the top. like that. And instead of channel, say we call this Web API. And we need to include the builders in here. Now we don't really need this anymore. We're still going to need this builder, but we don't need all of this. In fact, we don't need anything all the way down to here. Like that. Because what we can do is we can say WebAPI.Add services, and your services are going to be your builder services. Configuration is going to be configuration. And yes, we definitely need authentication. And then your web API, you're going to say add controller information. And that's going to go to your builder services, like that. And that would eliminate all of this code out of here. So the choice is yours. I find this much easier to maintain. For instance, if I needed to change something that was very small, that you didn't think was very big, it wouldn't take very much time to do. For instance, when I had to add the open API, I just needed to put it in one location and then deploy. I didn't need to do everything else. So if we took all this out of here and I was starting a new web service like security, I could go to its program, and instead of doing all of this in here, it would have just been a drop. Now we only got 35 lines. This is a little easier to understand. The nice thing about the read app settings is that it will read everything that you need for app settings. So if I go to the web API, the base builder here, and you look at add services, every one of my services that I need is right here. Now, if it's not in the app settings.json, it doesn't load it in. And with the authentication being here, we're going to, there's all the double checks. Here's your JSON provider, building services and stuff. It's there. Needs to be, everything's here.
Thanks for watching the video. Please like and subscribe to the channel. I really hope you enjoyed the video. I really hope you now understand how JWTs work and how easy they are to use. If you have any questions on something, feel free to drop it in the comments below. I'll be happy to answer any questions that anybody has. You're always welcome here at the C# Workshop. And as always, have a nice day.